Hey everyone, wait until you hear about the shocking twist my life took. My wife had been working on her special project for 4 months now. It was not her personal project, but she was the lead person and responsible for its success. The project was designed to save her company, Bixler Enterprises. The last 4 months had been difficult due to the fact that she was forced to work hard. It was important for both her and the company. There was a good chance that Bixler Enterprises would go under if the project didn't get done. Sarah had a bachelor's degree from Albright and an MBA from Wharton. She was the smartest one in the family. I started working as an auto mechanic right out of high school, and after 21 years, I was still an auto mechanic. I didn't mind because I liked the work and it paid well. It was enough to pay for Sarah's college and raise 2 kids. We weren't living luxuriously, but we were doing well. The kids had already shipped out and things were going pretty well with our income. Sarah got pregnant 3 months after we were married, at the age of 18. For the first few years we were married, we lived with my parents. They had a big, empty house as 4 of my siblings had moved away. That meant we had a babysitter while Sarah got her first few years of college. Because of 2 pregnancies, the 4-year degree took 6 years to complete. It was hard, but she made it through. I always had a job and never lacked for overtime if I needed it. After Sarah graduated from Wharton, we rented our own place. She had job offers from several large firms, but they all required us to move. I didn't mind, but Sarah wanted to stay close to home. That's why she decided to work at Bixler Enterprises. It paid well, but most importantly, it gave her responsibility and the opportunity to advance. Sarah was a hardworking, dedicated employee. The presentation is Thursday at the Radisson Hotel in Philadelphia. I took a few days off work to assist her as needed. In the end, all I accomplished was making her something to eat when she got home. I didn't know anything about her job, nor did I want to know. High-level corporate business bored me. Businessmen from Europe, Asia, and South America came here. The company paid for their airfare and provided rooms at the Radisson Hotel while they were here. It was expensive as hell, and from some of the things Sarah had said, the company was overestimating its finances. Her presentation was important to her, to the company, and to over 200 employees. Until Tuesday evening, everything was going well. If this story left you speechless, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more unbelievable stories. Sarah came home in a new outfit, a gray suit with a white blouse. She laid out everything she needed on the bed in the guest room. When it came to housekeeping, she was normal, but when it came to work, she was meticulous. I didn't understand why she needed to pull out her fancy underwear, but I didn't say anything. In addition to her suit for the presentation, she had several cute little cocktail dresses for social events before and after the event. I had always avoided such events, but felt obligated to go with her if she wanted me to. She thanked me for the offer, but said it wasn't necessary. All the materials and equipment she needed were neatly stowed in the trunk of her Volvo before she left work. She drove the car herself to make sure everything was in perfect condition. She had all day Wednesday to get ready and all evening Wednesday to socialize with her guests. Sarah was so good at what she did that I felt it would have been better if I had just stayed away from her. Finally, she was done. She had checked and double-checked everything. All she needed now was a hot shower and a good night's sleep. I guess my mistake was that I started checking her stuff after Sarah started showering. I thought I was helping, but it turned out to be the opposite. I was shifting things on the bed when a small white envelope fell out of the side pocket of her makeup bag. An envelope from a drugstore, but not the kind we usually use. Inside were 10 pills. I had no idea what Previn was, and the instructions were confusing. If necessary, take 1 pill, and then a second pill 12 hours later. I thought it might be something she got from anxiety or nerves, but the instructions didn't make sense. The prescription was written in her name on Monday. I put the envelope back in as she was finishing her shower. I decided I wanted to find out more about Previn before I told her about it. Of course, if I mentioned it, it would mean I was going through her things. I hate dilemmas. While Sarah got ready for bed, I went to our home computer and typed in Previn. 10 minutes later, I joined my wife under the covers. I lay awake all night wondering why my wife had picked up a prescription for the morning after pill, especially after I'd had a vasectomy 10 years earlier. The next morning, I got up early, but I wasn't rested. I took a long walk, hoping it would clear my head. I reluctantly headed toward home, afraid of what I might do or say when I got there. My son Josh joined the Navy after high school and was in his freshman year in San Diego. Our daughter Gloria married her childhood sweetheart last year and just moved to Dallas. That left just Sarah and me. I missed the kids but looked forward to growing old with my wife. She was the only woman I'd ever been interested in. Now it was all turning to shit. If Sarah was having an affair, she hid it well. Of course, I never checked up on her. I never looked at her emails or cell phone calls. I had no reason to. I had no way of knowing what she was doing at work or after work. I trusted her completely. John, where the hell have you been? You want some eggs or something? No, just coffee. I wasn't feeling very talkative. What's wrong, honey? It's only for 3 days. You can come if you want, but you'll be bored to death. No, I really don't want to go, but I hate leaving you alone. I worry when you're not here. That's very sweet, darling, but it'll be all right. I'm not going to leave the hotel all this time. I'll spend most of today making sure the conference room is ready, and tonight I'll have a nice chat with our potential clients. Tomorrow, I probably won't even get a chance to pee. I'll be home as early as possible on Friday. I promise you a great weekend if you know what I mean. That all sounds good, but you can't blame me for worrying. I'm an auto mechanic and I have a beautiful and successful wife. Sometimes I get the feeling that you're less interested in advancing your family situation than you are in advancing your career. Stop it. Damn it, John. I've always respected what you do for a living and never pointed out otherwise. You raised 2 great kids and put me through college. You are a great husband, a great father, and a good provider, and never forget that. I finished my coffee while she cleared the table. Do you want me to call you? No, that's not a good idea. I'll have my cell phone off and I'm going to turn off my room phone for the night so I can get some sleep. I'll call you every chance I get. I helped her load the car. She was as fussy about it as she was about everything else work-related. It would take her 3 hours to get to the Radisson Hotel. I stood on the porch and watched her leave. I didn't bother asking her about the pills. I spent the rest of the morning on the porch. I don't remember ever worrying as much as I did now. I felt small and insignificant. I felt out of my league. I was a small-town guy with a mediocre job and a successful wife. It was a mismatch. I should have noticed it earlier. I felt stupid. The best suit I had was a blue blazer and a pair of pants. At least I had a few ties, even if they were 10 years out of date. I had just finished getting dressed when the landline phone rang. Hey, sweetie, I just wanted to let you know I got here okay. You had a good drive. I'm assuming the traffic wasn't too heavy. It was fine. I'll call you tonight. Now I gotta go. I'm in room 714. Sarah, I can be at my parents' or my brother's tonight. If you want to call me on my cell phone. Okay. Cell phone rings. I love you. Gotta go. I took my time getting to Philly. I didn't go straight to the Radisson. I stopped first and got a steak and cheese. It promised to be a long night. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I parked in the hotel garage and just waited. Sooner or later, I had to enter the hotel. I just couldn't decide when to do it. The ringing of my cell phone helped me make my decision. John, I just wanted to let you know that everything has settled. I'm going downstairs now to meet some people and have dinner. You didn't forget anything, did you? No. Everything's fine. I've got everything in my room for tomorrow. Do you need anything? No, Yon. Relax. I'm going to turn my phone off. I'll call you tomorrow morning. All right. Chuckles. Have fun. It's not fun, John. It's work. I didn't look too out of place. The lobby, restaurant, and conference rooms were full of people, so I could remain inconspicuous. There was a cute little brochure that showed the layout of all the hotel rooms. I wandered through the different rooms and stopped at the walls, looking around at the crowd. I had no idea what I would do if Sarah saw me. I would find out if and when that happened. I found an event board that listed all the rooms that were being used by the various groups. Bixler Enterprises didn't have any rooms available for Wednesday night. I found this interesting. Sarah had said she wasn't going to leave the hotel, but now I wasn't so sure about that. There were three dining rooms: family, casual, and fine dining. Sarah wasn't a big fan of dining with kids, so I went to the casual room first. It only took 5 minutes to make sure she wasn't there. I had better luck in the gourmet lounge. It was a cozy little booth nestled in the corner, the kind of table people reserve to have a private rendezvous. Sarah was wearing a black cocktail dress with a deep neckline and pearls. She looked elegant, and her companion looked like he appreciated it. I knew a few of the people Sarah worked with, and he wasn't one of them. He was familiar to me, but there was no way I could remember him. There were plenty of free seats, so I had no trouble crossing the room. There were candles and small glass candlesticks on the tables. I blew mine out and told the waiter it was bothering my glaucoma. I ordered the usual chicken dish and made myself comfortable. The waiter poured my coffee for the third time. "Excuse me. The guy at the table across the table looks awfully familiar. Do you know who he is?" Sure. That's Malcolm Eugene Foote. He's a member of the town meeting. He's expected to run for Congress in the next few years." "Is that his wife with him?" "She's very pretty." "No. This is the first time I've seen her. He always uses that table for special ladies, if you know what I mean." I just smiled at him and asked for the check. I had never seen Sarah so sensual with a man before. She seemed to catch every word he said like he was God or something. They weren't doing anything inappropriate, but it wasn't platonic or businesslike. When I left, they were finishing their second bottle of wine. Now I understood why she had taken her fancy lingerie. I made myself comfortable in the corner of the lobby so I couldn't be seen. 10 minutes later, they walked out of the restaurant. She held his hand as they walked across the lobby to the elevator. I watched the floor indicators carefully. That the elevator stopped on the third floor was a good sign. It meant she hadn't taken him to her room. It was a bad sign when the elevator didn't go to the seventh floor. It meant she went to his room. Just in case I was wrong about something, I sat in the lobby and watched the elevator for an hour. People came and went, but Sarah was not one of them. I got my empty suitcase out of the car and walked up to the front desk. Even though I could prove I was her husband, I had a hard time getting a key card. They relented after calling the room, but no one answered. Finally, I was on my way to room 714 with the key card. I didn't even turn on the lights at first. I just sat in the dark room for over an hour. It wasn't hard to make sure she wouldn't come back to the room. First, I packed all her clothes and personal belongings. I didn't leave anything behind. I checked the package of Previn. There were still 10 pills left in it. On the dresser, very neatly laid out, were all the items she would need for her presentation the next day. I began to fill the suitcase. There were 24 specially bound promotional folders and another 20 regular folders. All of them went into the suitcase. A digital projector went in next, followed by a laptop. I took her purse and cell phone, which she'd left in the room. All she had with her was a clutch and probably a tube of lipstick. I walked around the room as carefully as she did to make sure I didn't miss anything. Once I was satisfied, I put her car keys and my wedding ring on the dresser. Other than those two items, the room was completely empty. The elevator headed straight for the parking garage. I had no trouble carrying 2 suitcases, and 20 minutes later, I was on the expressway heading north. It was well over 3 in the morning. I had no idea it had been that long. An hour or two later, my cell phone rang. Caller ID showed it was the Radisson's phone number. John? Yes. Where are you? I'll be at the house soon. That's all I said. It was quiet on the other end of the line. Salesmen have an old saying: the first one to talk loses. It seemed like an eternity before she spoke. Hon, I'm sorry. She didn't ask anything and just hung up. I turned my phone off. It was obvious that she had gone back to her room. Later that day, she was to give a presentation that would save her company and bring her a promotion. I put the suitcases in the attic of the garage. Sarah never went there and never thought to look for anything there. Of course, at this point, I'm pretty sure it didn't matter. First, I gathered all my clothes and personal belongings. Most men have their own tools. It's usually a requirement for the job. I stopped by the store, loaded mine into the Subaru, and picked up my last paycheck. By then, the banks were already open. I didn't have to do any fancy money and asset manipulation. I just withdrew all the money from my accounts. I had lunch in Hagerstown, Maryland. I had enough money to live on for a few years, but I knew I would be looking for a job very soon. Sarah and I were alike in that. We both loved to work. I'm going to miss her. I killed a couple hours in the Luray Caves and rented a room near Whiteville. I had no idea what I was going to do. It was Saturday, and I found myself sitting at the Chattanooga Aquarium, watching nature I had never seen before. I spent a few hours just relaxing and decided it was a good place to be. I bought a year pass to the aquarium, and by dinner time, I had a place to stay. It was a mobile trailer in the park, but it was furnished and cheap. I didn't need much. First thing Monday morning, I was going to get a job. A good handyman can always get a job, especially if he's willing to work hard. I could remain inconspicuous until it was time to renew my driver's license or car tags. I'll worry about them when the time comes. Sunday afternoon, I called Gloria. I felt obligated to let her know what was going on, but Sarah had already told her. She was pretty frank with Gloria about what happened. She said she cheated, I caught her, I left, and she lost her job. I felt bad that she lost her job, but that was the price she had to pay. I asked Gloria to tell Josh what was going on the next time she talked to him. I also told her that I would call about once a month to check on how things were going. I didn't tell her where I was. By noon the next day, I had a job. It was actually a short walk from the trailer park, with the Waffle House about halfway there. What more could a man want? I don't know how they handled the paperwork, but I was getting $20 an hour with no questions asked. I was happy, and they were happy. I wouldn't even have to get into my money that I brought with me. About 2 months later, Gloria informed me that Sarah had moved out of the house and was living with her parents. Gloria didn't know anything else, but was happy that I was settled and doing well. Josh called me from San Diego just to let me know he was going on a cruise. He was an avionics technician on an aircraft carrier. He tried to explain what he actually did, but it was over my head. I never really knew much about technical stuff. Both of them were careful not to say anything bad about their mother. I appreciated that. After that, it was business as usual. I started talking to Gloria at least weekly. Josh and I started emailing regularly. Gloria talked to Sarah regularly, but she said very little about what she was doing or where she was. I never filed for divorce, and it seems Sarah never did either. I have a Tennessee driver's license and the tags on the Subaru. I started going to one of the local bars a couple times a month and even got laid. Two girls took turns becoming regular nighttime companions. They weren't looking for commitment, and neither was I. It seemed to work out well for all of us. Life was good. That was a long time ago, and I gradually forgot about Sarah. Eventually, Subaru started giving me trouble. I'd forgotten how long it had been. It was over 200,000 miles. I was pondering this over a mug of beer one day when I realized that it had been almost 5 years since I'd left home. I had kept in close touch with both children. Gloria had 2 children of her own by this time and wanted me to come visit them. Josh almost married a Thai woman, but at the last moment he refused. I usually worked 6 days a week and used Sunday to recover from Saturday night. There was no good reason for someone knocking on my trailer door at 6 o'clock on a Friday morning. Their rudeness was rewarded by a half-naked man opening the door. Day jockey shorts are disgusting, and the lady at the door, judging by the look on her face, agreed with me. She looked away, but her companion didn't seem to be impressed. Normally, I would have worn pants, but at a time like this, guests annoyed me. We're looking for John Terrell. I don't know you. My name is David Simmons, and this is my wife, Marcia. We have a problem, and we're hoping you can help us. I'm so sorry. I don't work by moonlight. If you need something done on your car, you'll have to go to the store. This elicited several blank stares and finally a response. It has nothing to do with your job. It's more of a personal problem. Can we come in? The trailer inside looked like crap. I rarely had guests, so I rarely cleaned it. Even my girlfriends insisted we go to their place. Be my guest. Let me put on my pants real quick. As I entered the bedroom, I left the door open. Just to show them what a welcoming host I am, I also put on a shirt. Would you like some coffee? It'll only take about 10 minutes. I moved some things off the couch so they could sit down. There was no answer to the coffee question. We have an adopted daughter of 4.5 years old who needs a bone marrow transplant, and we are hoping you can help us. We are willing to pay you if needed. Buy my bone marrow? No. We want to use it, and we're willing to compensate you for any inconvenience. I think you want to buy it. I was acting like a wise ass, and I suddenly realized it. These people were serious. They had a real problem, and they were looking for help. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue. Our best chance of finding a donor is next of kin. You're our best hope. Watch this. I don't mean to be a smartass, but I think you got the wrong guy. When was your daughter born? She'll be 5 years old in July. Marcia Simmons spoke for the first time, and she sounded sincere. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I had a vasectomy 15 years ago. There's no way I could be her father. Why was your name on the birth certificate? I can't answer that. Maybe you should ask her mother. That statement was met with silence. I felt sorry for these people, but I didn't know how to help them. What's the mother's name? Sarah Louise Terrell. I couldn't find the words. Maybe I shouldn't have taken those damn pills from her. Of course, then those people wouldn't have a daughter at all. I thought I was done with grief, and here it is again. Old memories of my wife having sex with that damn Philadelphia politician. I was starting to forget it all, and now it was back. God damn it. I now understand and apologize for my rudeness and insensitivity. I will do everything in my power to help you. First of all, why can't Sarah get a bone marrow transplant? Medically, she can't. Why not? She's a mother. She has to be a worthy donor. Oh, she's a suitable donor, but she's too sick. The doctors refuse to even consider using her. Sick. With what? She's dying of liver failure. She's got less than 6 months to live. This doesn't make any sense. She's always been in perfect health. Besides, I don't believe a diseased liver will prevent her from donating bone marrow. The hospital won't accept her signature on the consent form. Are you saying there's something wrong with her head? They both looked at me in silence. They knew the answer, but they didn't want to say it. At that moment, I didn't want them to feel even more awkward. 10 minutes ago, I didn't care about them, but now I felt like I had to protect them and help them. How did this happen? Could any of my kids help? Maybe, but we thought you were our best hope. Why don't you go after your father, your real father? We thought it was you. We have no idea who else it could be. Sarah didn't tell us anything about another possible father. In fact, she was in no condition to explain anything. Marcia added, we got most of our information from the adoption agency. I had to get coffee and take a leak. Excuse me for a moment. I left my guest sitting there while I brewed the coffee. It only took a few minutes. While it brewed, I did a much-needed morning pee. I tried to be discreet. I'd embarrassed Marcia enough already. Where do you live? Westchester, Pennsylvania. I'll make you a deal. If I tell you who your daughter's real father is, you have to promise me you'll pursue him relentlessly until you get what you want. What are you talking about? Your daughter's father is a prominent politician in Pennsylvania. He will, of course, deny everything and will probably provide you with legal documents to stop your efforts. If you agree to push hard enough to get him to admit that the child is his, you can shame him into getting a bone marrow transplant. That's what you want, right? Yeah, sure, but how do we do that? I don't know. I'm a mechanic. I work metal for a living. I think the best way would be to use television, radio, and newspapers. Politicians will do anything to avoid bad press. Do you have any friends who might be able to help? Well, now they were both smiling. I must have said something that gave them hope. I think we can do this. Who the hell is he? Malcolm Eugene Foote. He's running for U.S. Senate. I bet he'll do anything to avoid bad publicity. Coffee was ready, but David and Marcia couldn't wait to get home. Before they left, I told them how to contact Gloria and Josh in case they needed them. I was sure they would help. I also had them tell me where Sarah was. I would most likely be in Pensacola before they even got back to Westchester. I got a haircut and bought a new shirt. Sarah was a cheater who had ruined my life, but I still wanted to look good when I saw her. It was another trailer, but this time it was a nice new double. There stood her Volvo with a flat tire and a broken windshield. The woman who opened the door wasn't Sarah. She looked like she'd been doused hard and left soaking wet. She was at least 45, maybe 50, and must have had a hard life. The lack of makeup didn't help, and she just looked awful. I didn't get a chance to open my mouth. Damned if it wasn't John Terrell. I never expected to see you here. I had to use the old line. You're putting me at a disadvantage. Sherry heart. Come on in, honey. Can I get you a beer? No, but thank you. I'm here to see Sarah. Sherry walked across the room and stopped at the buffet in the dining room. Here she is, John. Look all you want. Her hand pointed to a brass urn that stood in the middle of the empty buffet. I guess I was too late. I didn't move, just stood there staring at the container in front of me. Can I have a beer now? Sarah moved to Pensacola after giving up her baby for adoption. She bought the trailer with the money she got from Bixler Enterprises after she was laid off. She had a profit share, 401k, and vacation and sick leave. She eventually took a job at a local garment factory where she worked in the shipping department. That's where she met Sherry. Sherry rented a room from Sarah. Every dime Sarah earned went to booze. She started with wine and gradually switched to stronger drinks, the cheapest ones. Eventually, she lost her job because of her drinking and was forced to use her savings. She never dated anyone or went out anywhere. Sherry stayed with her, paid her utilities, and bought food that Sarah wouldn't eat. It took her over 3 years to kill herself. Amazingly, she had a will and left me a double trailer and a Volvo. Sherry explained that Sarah was so upset about what she had done that she just gave up. She didn't try to prevent the pregnancy or even terminate it. The adoption had been arranged months before the baby was born. She never went back to work, except for the black jobs she did poorly. Sherry said that Sarah didn't seem to have any ambition or purpose in life. Sarah talked about me a lot but was afraid to try to contact me. Gloria gave her my number, but she never called me. It was as if her one-night affair had hurt her more than it had hurt me. I was there for 2 weeks and then I sold Sherry's trailer for $1 and got $1,000 for the Volvo. 2 days later, I was in Westchester visiting my new friends, David and Marcia. Malcolm Eugene Foote resisted at first, but David and Marcia turned the screws until he gave in. He insisted on DNA tests, which proved he was the father. To save face, he was more or less forced into a bone marrow transplant, which was successful. Malcolm's political career and family life did not make a favorable impression either. His decline in the polls was so rapid that the party replaced him with another candidate a few months before the election. His wife filed for divorce and was very public about it. Sarah and I are now traveling to Dallas to see Gloria and my grandchildren. I don't know how long I will keep Sarah with me. Probably. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I was married to my ex-wife for almost 3 years, but we had to go out separate ways due to her infidelity. My ex-wife and I grew up in the same town, so we weren't complete strangers when we started dating. We even went to the same high school, but I was a couple of classes ahead of her, and we didn't get close to each other until after college. From the beginning, I didn't want to leave our town for greener pastures or anything. I loved it there and always wanted to be close to the people who mattered. The same applied to my ex-wife. She returned to overlook her parents' restaurant after she graduated from college, and that's when our relationship started. We became perfect friends after she returned, and some months after we got to know each other better, we started dating. Since we all lived in a small town, everyone knew we were in a relationship and possibly would end up marrying each other, and that's precisely what happened. After a year and 7 months of being in a relationship, we got married and had a beautiful wedding. I worked as a carpenter and earned a decent amount of money monthly, so I gave my ex-wife the kind of wedding she wanted. It wasn't so big, but it was what she wanted, and everything turned out as planned. After we got married, we went on our honeymoon, but just 2 days after we left, we had to return because her mother passed away in her sleep. It was a very tough season for both of us, and the first year of our marriage was filled with mourning. She was an only child, and I imagined how terrible she must have felt to lose her mother like that. Meanwhile, I supported her in any way I could. I grieved with her, cared for her, and was there for her at all times. It wasn't how I wanted us to start our marital journey, but since death was something no one could predict or stop, I could do nothing. My ex-wife started coming out of her shell in the second year of our marriage. Because of her loss, she had become a shadow of herself and lost interest in many things. When this happened, I was so glad and looked forward to having the kind of marriage I always imagined. The first year had been very tough for me, and I loved her so much and didn't want to break our vows. I expected that our relationship/marriage would be fixed after she got over her mother's death, but that didn't happen. I felt like she was cold to me, and even if we got intimate, I didn't feel the spark we used to have while we were dating. Most times, it felt like I was forcing myself on her, and it kept getting worse that I had to do some research online. With my research, I learned a lot of things and understood why she acted that way. I knew I had to give her time, and it felt like we were drifting apart the more time I gave her. I didn't enjoy the first 2 years of my marriage, but I had to stay because I expected her to snap out of that state and change. One time, I even confronted her about her change in character and how I wasn't enjoying our marriage, but she called me selfish and insensitive. The very annoying part was that if we went out to a wedding, gathering, or whatever event we were attending, she would be very active, laugh at funny and dry jokes, and interact with people like everything was cool with her. But as soon as we got home, she would change. Our marriage was getting very boring, and after constantly nagging about her attitude for weeks, I started to see a few changes. She became more active at home, spent time with me, and we started doing all the fun things we used to do as singles, but never had the opportunity to do in our marriage because of the tragedy that struck. Sincerely, her changes made me feel loved, and throughout that time, our marriage was shaky and she was grieving. I never tried to play smart with or look at any woman in a way I shouldn't have. I'll admit there were temptations, especially since I wasn't getting what I wanted and our conversations were so boring, but I loved her so much, and I knew what a 5-minute mistake could do to our marriage. Our home was filled with happiness and laughter for the following months, and I enjoyed her company so much. The icing on the cake was when we found out she was pregnant, and I was so excited I would become a father. It meant so much to me. Overall, I was glad I was finally having the marriage of my dreams. About 6 months after my ex-wife found out she was pregnant, I decided to make things up to her. I knew the news of her mother's death had ruined our honeymoon, and even though she never mentioned it, I knew she would love to return to the same place. It was expensive, but I started saving for it 2 months after things returned to normal. After all the bookings and preparations were made, I broke the news to her, and we didn't just take it as our honeymoon, but as a romantic getaway, and she really loved it because our wedding anniversary was only a week after we'd returned from the getaway, and we planned on renewing our vows in front of friends and family. The renewal of vows was my idea, and I thought it was necessary because we were only beginning to enjoy our marriage. Eventually, we went on our second honeymoon getaway and had so much fun together. We visited places, took multiple pictures, and most importantly, tried different foods. We were only meant to spend a week there, and on our 6th day there, I made a shocking discovery. I can't really recall what took me to my ex-wife's phone. I think she was gisting me about the news that went viral on Facebook, and since I wasn't on Facebook then, she gave her phone to me so I could read it. Then she went into the bathroom to shower, and because I wasn't very interested in the news, I pressed the return key and it opened her text messages. I know I shouldn't have read her messages, but I couldn't resist the temptation. It was my first time doing so. There was a name saved as my happiness in Spanish, and it piqued my curiosity, so I opened the message, and to my greatest surprise, it was our former wedding planner. There were also a lot of pictures shared between them, nudes, pictures of them together in bed, and photos of them kissing each other. Another thing was they had been dating each other for 2 years under my nose, and a month after our wedding anniversary was their second anniversary. At that point, I felt the room spin and my chest almost exploded from being too tight. I would really love to explain how I felt, but no amount of words can describe it. I'm still somewhat surprised that I was smart enough to forward all their messages to my number in that state of shock and delete all that I sent to my phone so she wouldn't know. Honestly, the rest of our romantic getaway was ruined, and there was a change in my attitude too. I was so worried that the child she was carrying wasn't mine, and for nights I did not sleep well or think straight. I even missed working on most of my clients' projects because I was not in the right mind. Meanwhile, I kept everything in and did not confront her about anything. She was so engrossed with our small renewal of vows party that she thought I was having mood swings again. So, on our anniversary, we did our thing, and I was patient enough for our vows to be renewed. They didn't mean anything to me anymore, and after we were done, I asked that the gifts I got for her be brought in so she could open them in front of everyone. Anyone who saw the size of the gifts could tell they were framed pictures, but maybe she thought they were pictures from our second honeymoon. I asked for the photos to be given to her so she could open it herself, and she did. Immediately, she opened it. Everyone gasped and she froze. I asked her to open the second one, and she reluctantly opened it with tears in her eyes. Then I opened the last one myself. All three pictures were of her and our former wedding planner, in bed, naked together, and a picture of them kissing each other. Funnily enough, he was in attendance, and his wife and children were there too, since we were close in some way. I felt so satisfied to expose my ex-wife and embarrass her in front of everyone. Then I told her it was over between us, and I wanted nothing to do with the child she was carrying because it was obviously not mine. She cried, begged me, and even said she didn't know how she entered an affair with him, but she was drawn to him because he comforted her more and didn't fake his grieving like I did. I was shocked to hear her say that because I sacrificed so much in her grief to be with her. It hurt, and it was more reason to get her out of my life. We divorced shortly after, and the whole town carried the news. The wedding planner's wife was so mad, too, that she divorced him, and in addition, he was forced to retire after the word spread like wildfire. I never took responsibility for the pregnancy, and the wedding planner said it wasn't his until DNA proved it was. It still hurts me whenever I remember what I got in return for being patient with my ex-wife and loving her foolishly. I haven't healed yet, and the wound opens each time I see her or bump into her. It's also been 4 years, and I haven't been in another relationship since then. I don't know if I will, but I'm sure I can never love another woman the way I loved my ex-wife. That part of me is gone. Opie, many men would not have renewed their vows with their spouses, especially after she did something this terrible to you. Your wife was using fake grieving as her justification to cheat on you. No matter what you did for her, she would never have appreciated it. I'm glad she is out of your life for good. You don't deserve such negativity. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now, let's move on to the second story of the day. My wife and I were what you'll call the perfect couple. We loved each other so much and attended events, gatherings, weddings, church, and other social gatherings. Like I mentioned at the beginning of my story, we attended the same church, and being that she was a very devoted Christian, attended church all the time, and didn't live the kind of lifestyle other women on social media did, I believed she was the one for me. I liked her from the moment I set my eyes on her, and because she was the only woman I was attracted to since I moved into the city, I thought it was wise to talk to a couple of people before we became a thing, and they all guaranteed me she was a great girl. Indeed, she was a great girl. She was well-mannered, polite, pretty, and kind to other people, including strangers. She was a college graduate and worked as a vet assistant in one of the biggest vet shops in town. On my end, I worked with a marketing firm, and I built websites as a side job. Eventually, I got closer to her after observing her for a while, and we ended up dating. We dated for only a year, and we got married. Initially, I thought I was making one of the best decisions of my life, but after things turned out the way they did, I realized I made a terrible mistake. After my wife and I got married, we had a son after a year, and our life seemed perfect. We were one big happy family, and I did my best to look after our son. Despite how much I tried to keep my family together and give them a good life, something always had to go wrong. The first thing that happened was that our 6-month-old son broke his left arm while my wife cared for him one weekend. That Saturday, I went to hang out with a couple of friends and then stopped to get groceries on my way back. When I got home, the first thing I heard was the loud cry of our son, and when I rushed to check what was going on, I met my wife, trying to stop him from crying. According to her, she wanted to grab something from a neighbor's house, so she asked my 7-year-old nephew, who came over to stay with us that weekend, to look after the baby, and in the process of playing with our son while she was away, he broke his arm. I don't really get how. Maybe my nephew must have pulled his arm too hard, or tried to throw him and grab him like we did in his presence. Funnily enough, when I returned home, my wife was all dressed, and it was odd for her to visit a neighbor looking all dressed. I suspected something was off, but at that time, what was most important was getting our son back to good health, and achieving that took a while. By the time our son had recovered fully, the matter had died, and I could not bring it up again. Although I tried to question my nephew, he was slightly shaken by what had happened, and his side of the story was not coordinating with my wife's. About a year after that, I noticed that my wife and I grew distant. We were both working hard to make ends meet, but it wasn't like our jobs changed. We still did the same job, worked the same hours, and split chores at home, and even though I was a bit difficult at times, I still loved her and treated her well. The reason we had issues was because she was just too careless and dirty. It was crazy for me to come home and see our son's removed diaper on a dirty plate in the sink, and the whole kitchen smelled terrible. There are also some things I cannot say here because of how embarrassing it was. Aside from her carelessness and not being as tidy as I wanted, we had no other issues. I also tried to make up to her whenever I started our fights and arguments, so she wouldn't think I was maltreating or nagging her because of our age difference. All this while, I never thought my wife would cheat on me until I saw things with my own eyes. It was devastating because I loved her more than I loved myself, and I sacrificed a lot to make her happy. That day, I came home from work about an hour earlier because I wasn't feeling well. When I got home, I noticed that our repairman's company truck was parked in my driveway, which was odd, and because his vehicle was in the driveway, I was forced to park behind him. When getting to my porch, I heard very loud moaning from my living room, and I immediately knew what was happening. To be sure of what I heard, I pushed the door open with force, and my eyes saw something I couldn't get out of my head to date. My wife and the repairman were doing it on our couch, and our son was in the living room watching them. I was so mad that I grabbed our son first before I kicked the repairman out of our house, and I yelled at my wife to join him, but she refused. She begged me, knelt down, and cried like she was innocent. She held my legs and even rolled on the floor if that wasn't enough. She told me she was sorry and didn't know what made her do it. She even tried to lie about it being their first time, but I was sure it wasn't. Without me saying it, she knew our next step would be a divorce, and before I even voiced it, she started begging me not to divorce her. She knew she had a reputation to keep, and that's why she begged me not to divorce her. I also knew she wanted our marriage, so I played a smart one on her. I told her I wouldn't divorce her if she told her friends, family, and the church the absolute truth about her affair with the repairman, and she agreed. I kicked her out of the house and took our son from her to avoid making her feel comfortable with the crime she had committed. Meanwhile, while the repairman was around, I threatened to report him to the organization he worked for, and I did. I had heard stories of repairmen and pizza delivery boys having affairs with married women, but I thought it was made up until it happened to me. Long story short, she exposed herself, and it turned out she was having an affair with him since the time our baby broke his arm. She lied and said she had gone out to get something from a neighbor, but in reality, she went out with him, leaving our son behind with a 7-year-old. When everyone heard this, they were so disappointed, and I still filed for a divorce and used her evidence against her in court. I also mentioned the part where she had our son in the living room while she was doing it with the repair guy, and I mentioned how careless she was to leave our baby with another child, which resulted in a broken arm. With all that presented, I won custody of our son. Meanwhile, her parents were so disappointed that they disowned her and wanted nothing to do with her anymore. Since then, she has been living with their rejection, and as for the repairman, his company fired him, but I don't know if they carried on with their affair. The church had to suspend her for a while, but I left the church and moved to a different house. This happened 2 years ago, and right now, I have met someone who also has a daughter around my son's age, and we are taking care of the kids together. Opie, I'm sorry you had to go through this. The truth is, most times, marrying a woman or devoted Christian from the church does not guarantee she will be faithful to you. Meeting a loyal partner has nothing to do with the church. It has more to do with the person's personality. Know that you just dodged a bullet. If she said she didn't know why she did it, then she could get confused again in the future. For now, focus on your new significant other and how to take care of the kids together, and make sure you heal properly so you don't think every woman you meet will be the same. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. Hey everyone, welcome back. You won't believe the shocking discovery I made. My wife, 41, and I, 46, were married for 18 years when our sex life ran out of steam. We had twins that were grown and attending college. When they moved out, I thought for sure our sex life was going to get a boost. It did for a month, but then having sex anywhere in the house at any time got boring. We read online that taking a friend vacation without your spouse is a good way to miss each other and crave intimacy. Friendly flirting can also help fuel the craving your partner has for you. I was skeptical of this, but it was the first time in a while I saw my wife so excited to do something. We started making arrangements for our separate vacations. For some reason, my wife and her friends decided to go to Colorado. On their tour schedule was the town where my wife grew up. As far as I knew, my wife didn't have a very positive childhood. I was surprised she wanted to go there and without me. I decided my friends and I would go to Wyoming. I always wanted to visit Yellowstone National Park. After the tickets were bought, my wife started texting on her phone a lot. I didn't want to bug her. I was pretty sure she was just making arrangements and chatting with girls about the upcoming vacation. I texted my friends about it, of course. We just didn't have as much to say. I asked my wife for a copy of their itinerary, and she was caught off guard by my request. She said she would have to edit it because she mixed up the dates on the first draft. Once she fixed it, she gave me one of the printouts. It was a bunch of girly activities like yoga, shopping, yogurt treats, hiking, and restaurants. Well, fast forward to 3 days into our 6-day vacation. I missed her a lot. I was having fun, but suddenly 6 days felt like way too long. To make matters worse, my wife stopped responding to me. It really made me worry. I told my friends about it, and they of course told me to just relax and enjoy my time away in a new place. I did, for another day. But my wife was responding really weirdly to my texts. It was like she didn't care what I had to say and only responded because she had to. I felt terrible, and I was worried. My wife's itinerary placed her group at a restaurant that night for dinner exactly 6 hours away from my friends and I. I started driving there at 1 p.m., so I'd get there by 7. When I got there, I found all of my wife's friends. They were shocked to see me. I asked them where my wife was, and they told me the worst news ever. She left them to meet up with someone else. I collapsed onto one of the chairs by their table, and they offered me even more information. They said she'd been on her phone until this morning, when she left before anyone woke up. She only texted them to say she wouldn't be back until late. I asked if she said anything else about who she was meeting or where she was going. Finally, one of her friends gave me a tiny piece of paper. She said it was for safety reasons, because my wife didn't want to go somewhere without someone knowing. It was an address. This friend added that my wife didn't want her to tell anyone, especially not me, where she was going, and this was only if she didn't come back in time for the flight home. Seeing as I showed up unexpectedly and concerned, this friend was persuaded to tell me the truth. I thanked her and ran out to my car. She caught up to me and asked if she could tag along. I agreed. I needed someone else to balance out my panic. Her name was Jade, and she told me about her family, hobbies, and work. It was a great distraction, but as soon as we got to the address, I was worried again. It was someone's house. There weren't any cars in the driveway, but it was only 8 p.m. Just before 9 p.m., a car pulled into the driveway. A man got out of the driver's seat, and my wife got out of the passenger seat. I got out, followed by Jade, and called out, "Hey, honey." She jumped and turned to see me. Her mouth was hanging open, and she was infuriated. She immediately asked what I was doing there and why I was with Jade. I told her she came with me for emotional support because I wasn't sure what I was going to find. I looked at the man I had never seen before and asked who he was. He boldly said he was my wife's lifelong friend and new lover. I punched him in the face. My wife screamed and got closer to him. She yelled that he didn't know we were married. I asked her whose fault that was. He didn't know because she didn't want him to know. I asked if she planned for this the whole time, and she refused to answer me, even having the nerve to say I shouldn't be there. She looked at Jade and blamed her for being a snitch. I stepped in and said she only told me because she shared my concern, and I drove 6 hours to find her. This trip was supposed to renew our intimacy and give my wife a chance to miss me as she thought fondly of us, but instead, she used this time to meet up with a man from her past. I told her she wasn't welcome back at her home, and we were over. I trusted her to remain loyal and use this time to benefit our relationship, and she chose to destroy it. I couldn't believe it. After all this ranting, her bold lover started cursing at Jade and I, demanding we leave. He encouraged her to get in the house. She made eye contact with me for no more than 4 seconds before saying she was sorry and following him into the house. 4 seconds was all the deliberation it took for my wife to leave me standing in another man's yard. 4 seconds out of 18 years. I got back in the car with Jade and started driving back to the restaurant. She apologized for me having to go through all of this. She said she wanted to keep me company when I got home if that was okay, and I graciously accepted. After she got back to her car, I started the long car ride home. I called my twin sons and guy friends to tell them what was going on. They were extremely sympathetic and flocked to my side for emotional support. 3 weeks after I got home, Jade was visiting me at least twice a week. I appreciated her a lot, just as much as I appreciated my sons and friends, because they continued checking up with me over the phone or in person. My sons told me they could never see Mom in the same light again. They kept in touch with her over the phone, but they dedicated themselves to their college studies and didn't consider changing their lives to help her in any way. One of my wife's mutual friends told Jade that her AP dumped her after 4 months for being too clingy. That had to hurt so bad. She was used to being married for 18 years. It's no wonder she was clingy to him. She probably wanted to be assured emotionally that she made the right decision, but that only made him leave her. I wondered what she was going to do with her life now, but I didn't try very hard to find out. An entire year later, I checked my old email address and found that my wife had been sending me emails weekly that entire time. The messages ranged from extremely angry with me to completely desperate for my response and love. I was honestly relieved I didn't find these messages until a year later, because by now I was romantically involved with Jade and wasn't tempted to take my wife back after her infidelity. I hope this story encourages people not to cheat. I hope it encourages people who are going through betrayal to know it's really okay. It's not the end of the world, and life goes on. Even though my wife's world turned upside down, she still had another chance to change her ways and make herself a better woman. Wow, up. I am so sorry you had to endure the betrayal of your lifelong partner. You came out of your comfort zone for the chance to improve your marriage, and your wife made the selfish decision to meet with another man. I am sorry your wife didn't understand how beneficial and worthwhile it would have been to rekindle the flame in your long, successful marriage. She chose to sacrifice the father of her children, the man she spent 18 years with, for a fling that only lasted 4 months. Please, people, do not do what this woman did. She probably told AP her pity story about how her sex life was boring now and added that she was about to be in town for a few days. All AP heard was that he could have sex, probably more than once, with a woman he didn't have to commit to. Who knows what he promised her at the time, but it seems like as soon as she made the jump and switched men in her life, AP proved he wouldn't provide her the stability she was accustomed to. The lesson here is not to have sex with anyone who isn't your long-term companion. Sex is intended to be a sacred expression of love and commitment, but when it's had with the wrong people at the wrong time, it brings trouble. The best way to spice up your love life with a long-term spouse is communication. Sexy and out-of-the-ordinary communication. You probably know what your spouse enjoys, so focus completely on that. Become a selfless fiend for what they crave, and you'll surprise the both of you. If you aren't sure what to say, ask them about it or just let them know you're going to try some new pillow talk. Thank you for sharing this story. Now, let's get into today's second story. Today I'm going to tell you all about one crazy life-changing event that happened to me. It all started when I got a phone call halfway through my workday. My wife, 27, and I, 33, were married for 6 years at this point, and she had been looking for a job for a year. She earned a small amount of money by making crafts and selling them on Etsy. I didn't want her to feel rushed or forced to get a job she hated. She'd already been through a really crappy childhood, so I only ever wanted to motivate her and make her feel safe. Our relationship seemed wonderful to me. She would get depressed sometimes, and I knew it was because of painful memories of the past. I asked her what was on her mind at least once a day, but much of the time she didn't say anything. When she did, it wasn't anything I could help with or didn't already know. So on this particular day at work, I got a phone call from the police department of the next county over. I was confused but listened as he explained that he had no choice but to arrest my wife today. Understandably, I freaked out. I asked him what the hell happened and what was going on. He said they received several calls about a woman setting a car on fire in one of the residential neighborhoods. My first thought was that there was no way it was my wife, but he verified her name and phone number and said they had possession of her car. I was absolutely mind-effed. I asked if she gave any statement, the reason for being there, or an explanation, and he said so far she was unwilling to talk to them. I asked if she was allowed to call me, and instead he asked me to come in person to talk to her. I agreed. When I got there, they had me sit in the interview room with her. Her expression went from hardened and angry to soft and defeated. She covered her face with her hands. I asked her what the heck happened. I needed to know because I could not figure this out. She whispered that she couldn't tell me. I asked why. She said it was because we were being recorded and I wouldn't want to know. I said she was wrong. I wanted to know, and she was apparently caught red-handed, so the only thing left to do was explain herself. She sat up, revealing her reddened and depressed face. She said she was setting fire to her ex's car because he cheated on her. After I let this sink in a bit, I asked her how long ago this happened and why seek revenge now. She really didn't want to answer me anymore, but I was her husband. She was in a police station. Her options were limited. After breathing a lot and crying, she told me he cheated on her last night. I said what, and she went on to explain that she'd been seeing him for a few months while I was at work. I could not believe what I was hearing. The cops were gonna have a ball watching this drama unfold, so I clarified that she was seeing AP behind my back, and when she found out he cheated on her last night, she decided to set his car on fire in broad daylight. After hearing my words, she looked like a shell of a woman. I told her I was ashamed to be her husband. She exposed her own affair by losing any self-control or responsibility she had left. I told her we were over and left the police station. I got a few sorry looks from some of the officers. My wife freaked out. She could only call people with permission from the cops, so the next person she called was her grandmother who raised her. Her grandmother actually thought it was a scam call and didn't look into it any further for another 3 weeks. Then she was finally contacted and paid my wife's bail. In order to afford it, she had to take out a loan. This was just the start of my wife's consequences. After she was out of jail, she tried to call me over and over again. After receiving 15 calls in one day, I finally answered it. She begged me to hear her out and at least meet her for coffee. She said it was the least I could do after the ordeal she'd been through, and our 6-year relationship deserved one more chance of survival. I laughed a good hearty laugh. I told her our 6-year relationship was over, dead in the past. I only kept that relationship with her in good faith that she would never go behind my back and sleep with another man. Not only did she do that, but she also jumped at criminal activity by setting his car on fire. She wailed and sobbed into the phone like it was her lifeline. I told her she made the decision to go behind my back, and anyone should know it's only a matter of time before the truth comes out. I just got lucky because her idiotic actions did the work for me. I wished her luck in whatever she tries to do next with her life. As I said that, she started screaming for me not to hang up, but I did. Her aunt contacted me 4 months later. She asked if she could bring a truck over to get my ex's belongings. I said that was fine, and she went on to explain that my ex's grandmother passed away and the house was in foreclosure. So my ex was moving in with her and I'd finally get her crappy belongings out of my house. That sounded fine to me. I did wonder how she was holding up, but I didn't ask. By this point, I started seeing another woman and did not want to give any false hope by asking questions. I hope my story encourages everyone not to cheat on their partner. There are two things that helped me get through this ordeal the most. The first was exercising daily. I didn't want to do it, but I forced myself to use my muscles until I could feel the burn. It helped me to get out built up anger and turn my attitude around for the better. I wasn't feeling down on myself. I was feeling positive and capable. The second thing I did was show myself love and care by doing what I wanted. Most of the time it was listening to music and dancing. Other times it was reading, watching TEF, drawing, playing music, or going for a walk. Opie, I am so sorry your wife went behind your back for months to sleep with another man. I'm sorry that you found out about her arrest for setting a car on fire. I can only imagine the shock you felt as her husband. This just goes to show that sometimes spouses cannot control or predict their partner's actions. You may think you know someone as well as you possibly can, but they could have so much pain and smothered emotion from their past that it comes out in a most unpredictable way. When this happens, please do not blame yourself. You can't possibly know or control what someone else is thinking or doing. Even more importantly, their disregard for you and the consequences they'll bring does not determine your self-worth. It simply means that they had pain and emotions they did not know how to handle or resolve. It means they made very poor decisions because of their pain and perception of things. As humans, we are all nothing more than a combination of several faculties working together, and when we let something that's ultimately meaningless affect how we behave and treat others, that's a mistake that will undoubtedly cause a ripple effect. I wish you the best of luck in life. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I have an incredibly shocking and nerve-wracking story for you. It's about trust, betrayal, and the lengths one man went to uncover the truth. Imagine discovering that the person you love most in the world might be hiding something so devastating that it could destroy your entire life together. Well, that's exactly what happened in today's story. So, sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for I caught my wife's affair with the butler, and it got worse when I fired him. 10 years into our marriage, I became very wealthy thanks to the percentage of ownership I had in my father's company. So, I bought my loyal and lovely wife a mansion for us to live in, which came with a butler who was prepared to take care of all the undesirable chores. My work schedule was pretty spontaneous because I could visit the office as I pleased or work from home. Our marriage and life together for the next 20 years after that were blissful other than some odd moments and occurrences. One day, I arrived home from work to find the butler with my wife, standing side by side doing dishes. She was drying, the easier part, but I didn't understand why she was willingly doing any of the chores and standing so close to him. Their elbows touched a few times, and I coughed to let them know I was there. My wife jumped, but he just moved away from her a little bit. She said she felt bad he was in here all by himself, so she wanted to keep him company and help a bit. She was so cheery and warm, I couldn't tell if she had any ill intentions. Another time, I came home to find her lounging in the pool with the butler gardening and staring at her. They laughed a few times before I came out to greet them. It was clear that they were at least friends, but I didn't like how friendly they were. I thought I was just being controlling and jealous, so I accepted that my wife was friends with and cared about the butler. What was the harm in that if I trusted my wife of 17-ish years at this point? We spent every moment I wasn't busy together. I loved her, and I could tell she loved me. Yet another odd occurrence was when I walked upstairs to find the butler closing our bedroom door. It had been hours since I was upstairs because my wife was still sleeping. It was odd, and I asked him if she called for him. He jumped when I spoke and turned around sheepishly, although I could tell he wanted to act normal. He stammered and said she called to ask him for some water. I accepted that for a moment, but reminded him that he was not to enter our bedroom or open the door. He didn't know what to say besides, "Yes, sir." He walked away quickly, and I opened the door to find my wife in her panties drinking water. I asked her if the butler saw her like that, and she said no. She just took off her robe again. I was skeptical. I was heavily considering hiring a new butler. It seemed like she was flirty with him, at least, and I didn't like that he was most likely in our bedroom with my wife in her panties. Before I could terminate him, I saw him smelling my wife's panties. I know. It's really bad, really ballsy. I caught him on the security camera. I told him that was unacceptable and made my wife really uncomfortable. I didn't even tell her about it, but when I told him she was uncomfortable, he instantly looked like he didn't believe me. That ticked me off. I told him he was fired. I hired someone else, this time a female maid since I knew my wife was straight. I decided that even if I was jealous and protective, it was a smart decision. 1 week later, I arrived home to find the maid outside gardening. I went upstairs and found the butler I fired coming out of our bedroom once again, except this time he was dressed in regular, but still kind of formal, clothes. He looked at me like he was amused, but inconvenienced because I was there and saw him. I asked him what he was doing in my house again, and he told me my wife hired him for something else. He said it with such nerve. All I wanted to do was punch his smug face. I told him to leave and not to come back, no matter what my wife told him. As he walked away, I went into the bedroom and found my wife wearing a skimpy little nightgown. I asked her what was happening, and she looked nervous. She said I was home earlier today than the week before, and I told her she always knew my schedule was spontaneous and not to change the subject. She turned red and told me I was freaking out over nothing. I asked her why she couldn't explain why she was here in her skimpy nightgown after the butler I fired just came out of the room. She was pretty stunned and said she hired him back for things around the house the maid couldn't handle. I asked if one of those things was helping her with her personal plumbing and lubrication. Her jaw dropped, and she couldn't look me in the eye. Her cheeks must have been burning. They were so red. It looked like blood vessels in her face were showing up. It was crazy. Her face never turned that red in all the 30 years we were together. She finally said in a weak voice that if he did help her with that, it was nothing against me. I told her that it most definitely was against me because she belonged to me. We were life partners, and only I was permitted to help her with her plumbing and lubrication. She said she wouldn't ask him to help her again, and asked me not to worry about it anymore. I asked if that meant she was admitting to sleeping with him, and she was silent. She nodded yes very minimally, with her eyes watering. Then she started speaking really fast about how it didn't matter. She just considered it a job, nothing meaningful that would take away from our marriage, and she needed me to forget about it so that nothing changed between us. I told her this was most certainly going to change things between us, and it already took everything away from our marriage. I told her we were over, called her a name, and told her to get out of my home. I was extremely careful to get a postnup signed after I came into more money. It's not that I didn't trust my wife at the time, it was because my father and I were lawyers, which means I couldn't ever be made the fool. So my wife sorrowfully packed her bags. She had too many bags for someone with nowhere to go. The butler came to pick her up in the car he afforded with the paychecks I gave him. They stayed in a motel where the butler had been staying after I fired him. My wife had so many belongings, clothes, that she had to leave some of it behind, which I immediately told the maid to sell on eBay or keep for herself. They stayed in that motel as long as they could, but their money ran out without me signing the checks. They tried to contact me, individually, blaming each other for what occurred and asking me to take them back into the mansion. It was gratifying that they were turning on each other and failing to survive or do anything with their lives. Even to this day, my ex still tries to ask me for help and gives me some updated sob stories about where she is in life. It is not glamorous. It's far from what she was accustomed to with me. I've become something like Bruce Wayne in town, and I have no complaints. Even though her betrayal hurt, I knew from the moment I found out that I could recover from it. Not because of my money, but because I know what love is. And it wasn't that. Opie, I am sorry your wife couldn't see what a great life she had with you. I honestly feel like the attention and sexual tension she experienced with the butler was too much for her immature brain to handle. It was a man in close proximity to her that she shouldn't sleep with, no matter how much he would have been willing. He obviously paid her attention, and when their friendship developed, she couldn't keep her legs closed. I believe she was egotistical and materialistic, and didn't have the respect she should for her providing and loyal husband. What this type of woman needs to understand is that resisting temptation pays off in the end. No man should be able to convince them to disrespect themselves and their spouses by breaking their vows and trust. I'm not sure what happened in your wife's head, but we are all here for you to offer support. Now, let's get into our second story for today. One fateful day, when my wife went to work, she forgot her phone. I took the opportunity to check it and was appalled by what I found. I should have known what was going on because my wife, 25, was extremely excited about going to work suddenly. She said it was because she became in charge of a business task that she really enjoyed. It was something like designing different abstract images each day for a newsletter. I, 28, believed her. She was a good girl, and I was proud of her for earning us additional income for living expenses. The only other dead giveaway was that she didn't want to have sex as often, but then I knew why. It was because she was sexting with a coworker, sending pictures, and talking about the sex they had. It was disgusting. I drove to her work immediately. I backed up all the stuff for her phone, because although she wasn't getting it back, it was going to be deactivated. I brought it with me, and started by showing the receptionist, who I only met once before. Then I asked her if I could get a guest pass to go have lunch with my wife. She giggled and gave me one. She knew I was sarcastically infuriated, and this was gonna be a heck of a show. She followed me in, putting up a "be back in 5 minutes" sign that she scribbled out. Everyone looked up from their desks to see me. I must have looked determined and angry. I asked everyone to gather around, and they did. I said I had some news to share about somewhere they all knew well. They were all sparkly-eyed with gossip endorphins when they found out who I was talking about. People started looking around for AP and my wife. AP came out of the bathroom just then, and we all looked at him. I announced that there was a guy who had the audacity to sleep with my wife. Some of the co-workers started shouting out insults at him. Among these, he was called despicable. Just then, my wife's head peeked out of her office. When she saw everyone looking at her, she went back inside and shut the door. Now everyone knew what my wife and AP looked like naked. Some girls whispered that they knew something was going on between them. Coworkers took the time to print/draw signs that said slanderous insults and taped them on my wife's office door. I thanked them for their creativity and left, wondering where the boss was that allowed all this to happen. When my wife got back to the house, I already had the locks changed. She took the stuff I let her have to AP's house. They both quit their jobs that day and walked out shamefully. In our town, there was just one major employer for like half the population. So, when I shared with people the things my wife talked about and took pictures of, everyone in the area knew about it or saw it. It didn't take long for them to decide to move about 500 miles west. I couldn't have asked for a better outcome. Since she moved out of state, our divorce was made final through the mail. She didn't ask me for anything, thank God, but I would have been able to prove her infidelity anyway. She was done with me and the embarrassing past she was trying to forget. I felt the same way about her and couldn't be happier with the choice I made. Opie, I am sorry your wife behaved like an untrustworthy office cheater. It's hard to get as low as a person who cheats on their spouse while utilizing their trust to earn income for the family. What are they even working for if not to improve the life they have at home? If they honestly believe the person they start an affair with at work or anywhere is better than the spouse they have at home, they're wrong. The grass may seem greener on the other side. Finding a person with a new set of features, issues, habits, goals, and interests is completely unnecessary. It is only a shame when a marriage or union ends because one spouse thought they found better in someone else or just thought they could effortlessly manage two serious relationships. Really, the only grounds for divorce, the proper way to end a marriage, is when one person absolutely cannot or will not honestly communicate with the other person. Thank you for sharing this story. I appreciate your bravery and bold confrontation. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with others who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more